a lot of people struggle with that jump from gold to Bitcoin still. There's a lot of people, and like, so I post a lot on LinkedIn because I try and get outside the echo chamber, and by doing that, I get a lot of like hate comments on it, which I really like because it's then people challenging, and it shows that I'm getting out to the right audience. But one of the ones this week, and probably every week I get, is there's no intrinsic value. So how do you go out, because you've gone from that gold to Bitcoin? How do you battle this?
How
Yeah,
do you answer that question?
yeah,
Yeah. So here's how I would answer it. Firstly, you ask what gives gold its value, right? It's not the fact that you can make jewelry with it, right? It's not that you can use it for some science experiments or something like that. The vast majority of gold just sits in a vault in London or New York or Toronto, right? It's dug out of the ground. It's processed, goes through refining, and it goes into a vault, and nobody sees it for decades or maybe hundreds of years, right? So why does it have value? It's because of social consensus. It's because people agree that it has value, but that's in turn driven by its scarcity, right? And these monetary properties that Karl Menger talked about, the father of Austrian economics, talked about the properties that are the different attributes of money, which is scarcity, portability, divisibility, verifiability, fungibility, right? History, durability, and so on. So gold had, it was the best asset in terms of when assessed on all of these attributes. It was the best. It has been the best performing commodity over the last 8,000 years, and therefore it acquired that kind of intrinsic value, it kind of consensus as to what value it should have, it should command in society, right? Now, if you take the same metrics and evaluate Bitcoin, it's as good or better than gold on every metric, except perhaps history. But obviously, anything that disrupts an incumbent obviously has a shorter history than the incumbent by definition. So you can't fault Bitcoin for that. But on every other property, Bitcoin is superior to gold, except maybe fungibility. Right? Fungibility is shit. Bitcoin's only kind of little shortcoming. But other than that, it vastly exceeds, or it's far superior to gold. So when you compare it and hold it like side by side with gold, ask yourself, why does gold have value? And then you do the same analysis for Bitcoin. It's very easy to explain, that kind of intrinsic value. But the other thing is it's like Bitcoin is not just code, right? I think many people go down that they kind of just make the mistake. It's a cognitive kind of, it's just another payments technology. Okay, Bitcoin, it's just C++ code, right? You can replicate it. Like it doesn't have any value. It's sort of thing. It's open source. You can copy it. But that's just completely missing the point. And is so much more. It's like the code is maybe 5 or 10% of what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. It's the consensus. It is the incentive structure and design. It's the game theory. It's the 17-year history that comes together, network effects, the Lindy effect, the 10x improvement rule. All these forces come together to make Bitcoin, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, again, yeah, it's not just C++ code. It is 100,000 nodes. It is 1 million plus mining machines around the world. It is billions of dollars of mining equipment that's been distributed around the world, and $2.5 trillion of humanity's wealth that's stored within it. That is path dependent. You can't just replicate it like that, and that in and of itself is what gives it its intrinsic value. I mean, that's my best shot at it. I mean, people come at it because, particularly people from TradFi, you can't blame them, because you're taught, if you do your CFA or you do an MBA or something, you do discounted cash flow analysis, your revenue multiples. You look at what is the cash flow for the business, what is the P&L, what's the burn rate, and all these things. You used to thinking about things that the words intrinsic value derive from the valuation methodology of a company that produces a revenue stream, right? And so they come at it with that kind of framework and that mindset, but it doesn't. You're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's not how you should be thinking about this. It's a wrong mental model.
So true. And like going on, like how Bitcoin is different. What was I'm going to read it after, but I'd like a little summary of Bitcoin, not crypto. Like, what was that article laying out? And did you go through a period of crypto, or did you just jump straight from gold to Bitcoin?
No, actually, I'm quite fortunate that I skipped the crypto thing. I just had I think, and I owe a lot to Twitter, particularly the old Twitter, not the new Twitter. And the Twitter of 2019 and 2020, when there was some really great people on there. I mean, GG was on there, Bitstein, Michael Goldstein was on there. And Saif as well posted a lot of really, I think he still does, but he posted more back then. Robert Breedlove also used to post some really good stuff. These guys actually, I just followed the right people like very early on. And of course, Trace Mayer, really, I'm going way back, like 2017 and so on. So I was quite fortunate to find, the right kind of teachers in that sense and not go down the road. But look, I mean, I'm not going to, like, I don't want to diss, crypto because stable coins came out of crypto. There's other, utilities or whatever. All I'm saying is that they are fundamentally different. There's only one candidate for, this idea of disrupting monetary policy and central banking, and that is Bitcoin. Or another way to look at it is there's only one that offers, a real assurance on absolute scarcity. Nothing else does. Most of them, Ethereum doesn't even have a supply cap, right? Nobody knows what it is. They've changed it like a dozen times. There are some that claim to have a supply cap, but then they're very centralized and they can change it if they want. They've changed it before, they can change it again. So it's only Bitcoin that gives you that kind of supply cap. So yeah, but in my paper, I basically talked about that. I talked about what, so where does that supply cap assurance come from, right? You need to really, in order to trust that it's 21 million, you have to understand why it's 21 million. You shouldn't just say, oh, okay, Bitcoin's capped at 21 million, but really? You need to understand why. And that takes a lot of study. It takes hundreds of hours of trying to understand how those incentives actually come together, right? So my paper was essentially going into that and talking about how the, Bitcoin's creation of digital scarcity is a path-dependent one-time invention. It's not possible to replicate it. So that was the core of that paper. However, I mean, there's in my book there's a chapter titled "Once in History Invention," and that goes back to my paper, but really builds on it. So if you read the book, if you read that chapter, you'll get everything basically that was in the paper.